He lost everything when the world shut down in March 2020. Today, he runs a company that employs 200 people and generates millions in revenue. This is the story of how one man turned the worst crisis of his life into the greatest opportunity he never saw coming. March 15th, 2020, the day that changed everything for Trevor Rodriguez. He was sitting in his cubicle at the marketing agency, where he'd worked for 8 years, checking emails and planning campaigns for clients who seemed increasingly nervous about their advertising budgets. The office felt different that morning. Conversations were quieter. People kept glancing at their phones, reading news updates about something called a pandemic lockdown. At 2:30 p.m., his manager called him into the conference room. Trevor had been through these meetings before, but never like this. The company was letting go of 60% of their workforce, effective immediately. The handshake was awkward. The cardboard box felt heavier than it should have. Walking to the parking garage with his desk belongings, Trevor felt like he was moving through thick fog. 8 years of his life, his steady paycheck, his sense of identity, all packed into a box that barely filled the trunk of his Honda Civic. The drive home was silent, except for the radio announcer talking about business closures and unemployment numbers that seemed impossible to believe. Trevor turned it off. He needed quiet to process what had just happened. But the quiet felt worse. It gave space for the panic to creep in. The mortgage payment. The car loan. His daughter Emma's college tuition that was due in 6 months. His wife Lisa's part-time job at the local bookstore wouldn't cover even a fraction of their monthly expenses. That evening, Trevor sat at his kitchen table with a stack of bills and his laptop, trying to calculate how long their savings would last. The numbers were brutal. 3 months, maybe 4 if they cut everything to the bone. Lisa sat across from him, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. She wasn't crying, but her eyes had that hollow look that comes when shock starts to wear off and reality sets in. "Maybe this is temporary," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe they'll call people back when things settle down." Trevor wanted to believe her. He needed to believe her. But deep down, he knew this wasn't temporary. The world had shifted, and there was no going back to the way things were. He'd built his entire career on traditional marketing, on handshake deals and face-to-face meetings, on business lunches and trade show booths. All of that felt like it belonged to a different era now, even though it had been his reality just hours before. The first week felt like a strange vacation. Trevor told himself he deserved a break, that he'd been working too hard for too long anyway. He slept in, watched the news obsessively, and applied for unemployment benefits that seemed designed to make him feel smaller with every form he filled out. But by the second week, the walls of his house started closing in. The routine that had anchored his life for years was gone, replaced by an endless stretch of empty hours and growing anxiety. Lisa tried to stay positive, but Trevor could see the worry eating at her. She started taking on extra shifts at the bookstore, even though foot traffic had dropped to almost nothing. Emma called from college, her voice bright with the kind of optimism that only comes from being 19 and believing your parents can fix anything. Trevor didn't have the heart to tell her that for the first time in his life, he had no idea how to fix this. By the end of March, Trevor had applied for 43 jobs. The responses were all variations of the same theme: hiring freezes, budget cuts, uncertainty about the future. Companies weren't just not hiring. They were laying off people left and right. The unemployment office was overwhelmed. The news kept talking about economic recovery, but Trevor couldn't see any sign of it from where he was sitting. The worst part wasn't the rejection letters or the dwindling bank account. It was the feeling of being irrelevant. Trevor had always prided himself on being useful, on solving problems and delivering results. Now he felt like dead weight, a burden on his family, and a casualty of forces completely beyond his control. He'd wake up at 3 a.m. with his heart racing, mind spinning through worst-case scenarios that all seemed equally possible. It was Lisa who planted the seed, though neither of them realized it at the time. Trevor was sprawled on the couch on a Tuesday morning in early April, laptop balanced on his chest, refreshing job search websites for the 3rd time that day. The same postings, the same requirements for skills he didn't have, the same polite rejections to applications he'd submitted weeks ago. Lisa was sitting at the kitchen table, trying to help her elderly neighbor Mrs. Chen figure out how to video call her grandchildren. Mrs. Chen had been practically a hermit since the lockdown started, too afraid to leave her house even for groceries. Lisa had been dropping off supplies for her, but the isolation was getting to the old woman. "I just don't understand these computers," Mrs. Chen was saying, her voice carrying the frustration of someone who'd been trying to learn something for weeks. "My grandson keeps texting me about this Zoom thing, but every time I try to use it, nothing works right." Trevor looked up from his laptop and watched Lisa patiently walking Mrs. Chen through the process again. Download the app. Create an account. Test the camera. It was the 4th time they'd done this together, and Lisa's patience never seemed to wane. She had this way of explaining things that made complex technology feel approachable, breaking everything down into simple steps that anyone could follow. That's when something clicked in Trevor's mind. It wasn't a lightning bolt moment, more like a gentle nudge toward a door he hadn't noticed before. Mrs. Chen wasn't the only one struggling with technology. The pandemic had forced millions of people who'd never needed video calls, or online shopping, or digital communication tools to suddenly depend on them for everything. And most of these people were learning through trial and error, fumbling through apps and websites that weren't designed with them in mind. Trevor had spent 8 years in marketing, but his real strength had always been communication, taking complex business concepts and making them accessible to clients who didn't speak the language of analytics and conversion rates. He was good at seeing things from other people's perspectives, at figuring out what they needed and how to give it to them in a way that made sense. After Mrs. Chen left, Trevor found himself thinking about all the conversations he'd been having with friends and family over the past few weeks. His father-in-law complaining about trying to order groceries online. His sister struggling to set up remote learning for her kids. His former colleague's mother, who couldn't figure out how to use her new tablet to stay connected with her book club. The problem wasn't that the technology was bad. The problem was that it wasn't designed for people who hadn't grown up with it. There was a massive gap between what the technology could do and what regular people needed it to do for them. And in that gap, Trevor saw something he hadn't seen in months. An opportunity. That night, he stayed up until 2 a.m. researching. Not job postings this time, but market research. How many seniors were trying to learn new technology because of the pandemic? What were the biggest pain points? What solutions already existed? And where were the gaps? The numbers were staggering. Millions of people suddenly dependent on technology they didn't understand, with very few resources designed specifically for their needs. Trevor started making notes, sketching out ideas. What if there was a service that didn't just sell technology to older adults, but actually taught them how to use it? Not through complicated manuals or impersonal YouTube videos, but through patient, one-on-one guidance that met them where they were. The more he thought about it, the more convinced he became that this wasn't just a business opportunity. It was a genuine need that nobody was addressing properly. The next morning, Trevor called his friend Jake, who worked in tech support and had been laid off around the same time. Jake had the technical skills that Trevor lacked, and more importantly, he had the same patient teaching style that Trevor had watched Lisa demonstrate with Mrs. Chen. When Trevor explained his idea, Jake was quiet for a long moment. "You know," Jake finally said, "my mom has been driving me crazy asking for help with her iPad. Every day it's something new. I keep thinking there has to be a better way to handle this." They talked for 2 hours that day, refining the concept. It wouldn't be a traditional tech support company. It would be more like a tutoring service, but for technology. They'd go to people's homes, work with them in their own environments, teach them not just how to use their devices, but how to troubleshoot problems and feel confident with technology. Trevor felt something he hadn't felt in weeks: excitement. Not the desperate excitement of someone grasping at straws, but the steady confidence of someone who'd found a path forward. For the first time since March 15th, he had something to wake up for that wasn't just survival. He had a purpose. Lisa noticed the change immediately. That evening, Trevor was animated in a way he hadn't been since losing his job. He was talking fast, sketching diagrams on napkins, explaining his vision with the kind of energy she hadn't seen from him in months. "You really think this could work?" she asked. Trevor looked at her, then at the notes scattered across their kitchen table. "I think people need this," he said, "and I think we can do it better than anyone else." Trevor woke up the next morning with more energy than he'd had in weeks. For the first time since losing his job, he had a clear task ahead of him that wasn't just applying for positions that didn't exist. He was going to build something from nothing, and that thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. The first challenge was money. Starting a business when you're unemployed isn't exactly ideal timing, but Trevor and Jake couldn't afford to wait for perfect conditions. They pooled what little savings they had left, about $3,000 between them, and decided that would have to be enough to get started. No fancy office, no expensive equipment, just the basics: business licenses, insurance, some marketing materials, and gas money to drive to clients' homes. Trevor spent the first week doing research that felt more like detective work. He drove around neighborhoods with high senior populations, noting which areas had good internet infrastructure and which communities seemed most receptive to new services. He visited senior centers, though most were closed due to COVID restrictions, and talked to staff members about what they were hearing from their members. The feedback was consistent everywhere he went. Older adults were struggling with technology, but they were also proud and independent. They didn't want to feel like they were being talked down to or treated like they were incapable of learning. They wanted patient instruction, not condescending explanations. They wanted to feel empowered, not dependent. Jake focused on the technical side, researching the most common devices and applications that seniors were trying to learn. iPads and smartphones, obviously, but also smart TVs, streaming services, video calling apps, online banking, and grocery delivery apps. He created simple, step-by-step guides for each one, written in plain language without technical jargon. By the second week, they were ready for their first test. Trevor reached out to Mrs. Chen and asked if she'd be willing to let them practice their service with her. She agreed, partly out of kindness, and partly because she was still struggling with that video call setup despite Lisa's help. The session went better than Trevor had dared to hope. Jake walked Mrs. Chen through her iPad settings, showing her how to adjust the text size and organize her apps in a way that made sense to her. Trevor took notes on what questions she asked and what seemed to confuse her most. After 2 hours, Mrs. Chen was successfully video calling her grandson and navigating between different apps with confidence. "This is exactly what I needed," she told them as they were leaving. "You don't make me feel stupid for not knowing this stuff." That comment became the foundation of their approach. Every interaction would be built on respect and patience. No eye-rolling, no sighs, no rushing through explanations. They would meet clients where they were and move at their pace, however long it took. Word spread faster than Trevor had expected. Mrs. Chen told her bridge club about the service. Her grandson posted about it on social media. Lisa mentioned it to customers at the bookstore. Within 3 weeks, Trevor and Jake had their first paying clients: a retired teacher who wanted to learn how to shop online, and a widower whose adult children lived across the country and wanted to stay connected through video calls. The early sessions were learning experiences for everyone involved. Trevor discovered that many seniors had been given tablets or smartphones by well-meaning family members, but had never received proper instruction on how to use them. The devices were just sitting in drawers, expensive paperweights that represented failed attempts at staying connected. Jake realized that the biggest barrier wasn't technical complexity, it was confidence. Once clients understood that they weren't going to break anything by experimenting, they became much more willing to try new things. He started every session by showing clients how to undo common mistakes, which immediately reduced their anxiety about making errors. By the end of April, they had 8 regular clients and a waiting list of 6 more. Trevor was driving all over the city, sometimes seeing 3 clients in a day, teaching everything from basic email to online banking. Jake was developing new training materials and handling the more complex technical problems that came up. The money wasn't much yet, but it was something. More importantly, Trevor felt useful again. He was solving real problems for real people, and the gratitude from clients was unlike anything he'd experienced in his corporate job. These weren't abstract marketing metrics or quarterly targets. This was Mrs. Patterson finally being able to see her new granddaughter on video calls. This was Mr. Williams discovering he could order groceries online and have them delivered, giving him independence he thought he'd lost forever. Lisa started helping with scheduling and basic bookkeeping in the evenings. Emma called from college and was amazed to hear her father talking about his work with the same enthusiasm he'd had when she was little. The family dinner conversations had shifted from worried whispers about money to excited planning about growing the business. Trevor still woke up with anxiety sometimes, but it was a different kind of anxiety. Instead of the helpless worry about things beyond his control, it was the productive nervousness of someone who had too many good problems to solve. How to handle the growing demand. Whether to hire help or expand to new areas. How to scale something that was built on personal attention and individual relationships. By May, they were booked solid 3 weeks in advance. Trevor realized they'd stumbled onto something much bigger than a side hustle to pay the bills. They'd found a real market with real demand, and they were just getting started. The validation came in an unexpected way. Trevor was leaving a session with a client when he ran into his former manager from the marketing agency. The conversation was awkward at first, filled with the kind of small talk that happens when someone who fired you is trying to be polite. But when Trevor explained what he was doing now, his former manager's expression changed. "You know," he said, "my dad could probably use something like that. He's been driving my mom crazy asking for help with his computer." Trevor handed him a business card, one of the first batch they'd had printed. Driving home that day, he realized he wasn't the same person who'd been laid off 2 months earlier. That person had been defeated, passive, waiting for someone else to solve his problems. This person was building solutions, creating value, making a difference in people's lives one session at a time. By June 2020, Trevor knew he was onto something bigger than he'd imagined, but he also knew that good intentions and individual sessions wouldn't be enough to build a sustainable business. He needed a system, a way to deliver consistent results at scale, while maintaining the personal touch that made their service special. The breakthrough came from an unexpected place: his daughter Emma's college psychology textbook. Emma was home for summer break and studying for a makeup exam when Trevor noticed her reading about something called scaffolding in education. The concept was simple but powerful. You break complex learning into manageable steps, provide support at each level, then gradually remove that support as the learner becomes more confident. Trevor realized this was exactly what they'd been doing instinctively with their clients, but without any formal structure. That night, Trevor and Jake redesigned their entire approach. Instead of going to each client with a loose plan and improvising based on what they needed, they developed what they called the digital confidence method. Every client would go through the same foundational steps, but at their own pace and with personalized applications. Level 1 was digital literacy, understanding what the device actually was and how to hold it, charge it, and turn it on and off without fear. This sounds basic, but Trevor had learned that many seniors had never been taught these fundamentals. They'd been handed devices and expected to figure it out, which led to anxiety and avoidance. Level 2 was essential functions, making calls, sending texts, taking photos, and connecting to Wi-Fi. These were the skills that made the device immediately useful in daily life. Jake created simple checklists for each function, with large print instructions that clients could reference between sessions. Level 3 was digital connection, email, video calls, and basic internet browsing. This was where most clients wanted to start, but Trevor had learned that jumping straight to this level without the foundation usually led to frustration and failure. Level 4 was digital independence, online shopping, banking, entertainment apps, and troubleshooting common problems. By the time clients reached this level, they had the confidence to experiment and learn new things on their own. The genius of the system wasn't just the progression, it was the support structure they built around it. Each client received a personalized binder with their progress tracker, step-by-step guides customized to their specific device, and emergency contact information for when they needed help between sessions. Jake developed a simple color coding system for different types of tasks that made the guides intuitive, even for people with vision problems. But the real innovation was what Trevor called peer mentoring. As clients completed Level 4, he began pairing them with newer clients who were just starting Level 1. The experienced clients became volunteer mentors, providing encouragement and basic help under Trevor and Jake's supervision. This solved 2 problems at once. It gave advanced clients a sense of purpose and achievement, and it provided additional support for new clients who were struggling with confidence. The peer mentoring program revealed something Trevor hadn't expected. Many of their clients weren't just learning technology. They were overcoming isolation and building community. The weekly group sessions they started hosting became social events as much as learning opportunities. Clients were making friends, sharing resources, and supporting each other through challenges that went far beyond technical problems. By August, word was spreading through communities faster than Trevor and Jake could handle. They were working 12-hour days and still had a waiting list of over 50 people. Trevor knew they needed to hire help, but he was terrified of losing the quality and personal attention that made their service special. The solution came from an unexpected source: their clients. Several people who had completed the full program approached Trevor about becoming paid instructors. They understood the challenges from personal experience. They had patience that came from having struggled with the same problems, and they had credibility that young tech support people couldn't match. Trevor was skeptical at first. Could retired teachers and nurses and accountants really deliver the same quality of instruction as trained professionals? The answer was a resounding yes, but only with the right support system. Trevor and Jake developed a certification program for client instructors, teaching them not just technical skills, but also their specific approach to patient, respectful instruction. By September, they had 5 certified client instructors working part-time, each handling 6 to 8 clients per week. Trevor focused on training and quality control, while Jake handled the more complex technical problems and continued developing new curriculum materials. The financial transformation was dramatic. In March, Trevor had been collecting unemployment benefits and burning through savings. By September, the business was generating over $15,000 per month in revenue, with profit margins that made his former marketing job look like charity work. But the real validation came from the results they were seeing with clients. People who had been isolated and frustrated were becoming confident and connected. Adult children were calling Trevor to thank him for giving them their parents back. Doctors were referring patients who needed to use telehealth services. Senior centers were partnering with them to offer group classes. Trevor realized they weren't just teaching technology, they were solving a massive social problem that had been made worse by the pandemic, but existed long before COVID hit. The aging population was being left behind by rapid technological change, and traditional tech support wasn't designed to meet their needs. By October, they had expanded to 3 neighboring cities and had a team of 12 instructors. Trevor had quit looking for traditional employment entirely. Lisa had left the bookstore to handle business operations full-time. Emma was working part-time developing social media content that actually resonated with older adults, something most marketing companies struggled with. The method that started with Mrs. Chen's video call problem had become a scalable system that was changing lives across the region. But Trevor knew they were just getting started. Every week brought new opportunities, new partnerships, and new ways to expand their impact. Today, 4.5 years after that devastating phone call in March 2020, Trevor Rodriguez stands in the lobby of a 3-story office building that houses the headquarters of Digital Bridge Solutions. The company name reflects what they learned their business really was. Not just tech support, but a bridge between generations, between old ways of doing things and new possibilities, between isolation and connection. The numbers tell one story. 200 employees across 15 states, annual revenue approaching $8 million. Partnerships with major technology companies who finally understand that selling devices to seniors without proper support was leaving massive value on the table. But Trevor knows the real story is in the details that don't show up on profit and loss statements. Every morning, Trevor still reads the client feedback emails that come in daily. Mrs. Patterson, who was one of their first clients, recently sent a photo of herself video calling with her great-granddaughter who lives in Japan. Mr. Williams, who learned online grocery shopping during the pandemic, now helps his neighbors set up their own delivery accounts. The peer mentoring program has evolved into a network of over 300 volunteer mentors who provide ongoing support to new clients across the country. The business model that seemed risky in 2020 now looks like obvious genius. Instead of trying to serve everyone poorly, they focused on serving one demographic exceptionally well. Instead of rushing people through impersonal training, they invested in relationships and long-term success. Instead of viewing older adults as a difficult market, they recognized them as underserved customers with significant purchasing power and specific needs that nobody else was addressing properly. Trevor's approach to hiring reflects everything he learned from those early days of desperation and discovery. The company employs a mix of traditionally trained tech professionals and what they call experience instructors, people over 50 who have completed their own digital literacy journey and want to help others do the same. The combination brings together technical expertise and genuine empathy in ways that neither group could achieve alone. The training program that started as a simple 4-level progression has evolved into a comprehensive curriculum that addresses everything from basic device usage to cybersecurity awareness to digital creativity. Clients don't just learn how to use technology, they learn how to troubleshoot problems, avoid scams, and explore new applications that enhance their independence and connection with family. Lisa now serves as Chief Operating Officer, overseeing the expansion into new markets and the development of specialized programs for assisted living facilities and senior centers. Emma graduated college and chose to join the company full-time, leading a digital content team that creates educational materials specifically designed for older adult learning styles. The family that almost fell apart during those desperate months in 2020 is now working together to build something that extends far beyond their own financial security. Jake, Trevor's original partner, now heads up the technology development division. He's working on adaptive interfaces and assistive technologies that make devices more accessible to people with vision, hearing, or mobility challenges. The company has become a testing partner for major tech companies who want to understand how their products perform with older users. But the impact extends beyond their direct clients. Digital Bridge Solutions has inspired similar companies in other countries and other demographic niches. Trevor regularly speaks at conferences about serving underserved markets and building businesses around genuine human needs rather than artificial demand. The Digital Confidence Method has been licensed to nonprofits and educational institutions who serve older adults. Trevor's perspective on failure and success has been fundamentally altered by the journey. The layoff that felt like professional death became the push he needed to discover work that was more meaningful and more profitable than anything he'd done before. The skills he thought were obsolete, patient communication, understanding client needs, building relationships, turned out to be exactly what was needed in a world that had become too focused on technical features and not focused enough on human experience. When Trevor speaks to groups of entrepreneurs or people facing their own career transitions, he emphasizes that the opportunity wasn't obvious at first. It required paying attention to problems that other people were ignoring, being willing to start small and grow gradually, and most importantly, staying focused on serving clients rather than trying to get rich quickly. The pandemic that destroyed his old career created the conditions that made his new career possible. Millions of people suddenly needed services that didn't exist before. Traditional business models were disrupted, creating space for new approaches. Geographic limitations disappeared as people became comfortable with remote services and online interaction. Trevor still wakes up most mornings with that sense of purpose and excitement that first emerged when he was sketching ideas on napkins at his kitchen table. The difference is that now he's not just solving his own problems. He's building systems that solve problems for thousands of people and create meaningful work for hundreds of employees. The lesson he shares most often is simple but profound. The crisis that seems like it's destroying your life might actually be clearing space for something better than you ever imagined. But you have to be willing to look for the opportunities hiding inside the problems, and you have to be brave enough to act on them, even when success isn't guaranteed. Trevor Rodriguez lost his job during the pandemic, but he found his calling, built a thriving company, and discovered that his greatest professional failure was actually the beginning of his greatest success. The man who thought his career was over at 45 is now creating careers for others and showing that it's never too late to start over, as long as you're willing to start where you are with what you have. End of the story. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next stories of overcoming,